Let's go golfing with Joel and Abby, up the mountain in the bright white snow. This might not make you so happy, but this is just the way the show must go. It's a Joel in one, and that is plenty, better than a Joel in 20. It's a Joel in one.
Right, so we have now seen the second episode of The Last of Us, Season 2. This is the big episode, right? This is the episode that, anyone who played the game was dreading. People who didn't play the game and who hadn't been spoiled about what happens in this season. This was probably kind of a shocker. I know I've heard from lots of readers who are saying, this is it, I'm not watching anymore. And certainly there were plenty of gamers who felt the same way. Of course, because spoilers. This is the episode where Abby kills Joel. Now, objectively, just in terms of the way this episode was structured and produced, I think it was very good. I think this was much better than last week. The battle for Jackson Hole was like something out of Game of Thrones. I honestly expected to see some White Walkers emerge from the snow. Maybe the Night King, bring the host of Cordyceps undead back to life or whatever. It was it was very much like Hard Home, right? Jon Snow could have shown up and helped Tommy out with that bloater. The bloater was actually my least favorite part of this because it made the show feel almost too fantastical or too much like a video game. The bloater had so many hit points. It almost had God mode turned on or something. They shot it 100 times, and then Tommy used his whole fuel tank for his flamethrower to kill that thing. But other than that, I thought that was a really well choreographed battle. It was intense. I'm not 100% sure still on why all these, on these zombies, we'll just call them zombies. I know they're not zombies, but I don't know why they are up in the snow like that, but that's neither here nor there. It was a very exciting battle. I think a lot of it was used to set up what comes next. In the game, Jackson Hole is not destroyed like this, so there's less of a reason to want to prevent Tommy and Ellie and Dina from going out to avenge Joel's death. But now that that they've lost a lot of life and the structures have been severely damaged, there's more reason to want to keep capable people in Jackson Hole and not let them go. And so that choice for them to leave is going to be a lot more difficult. And of course, this episode also sets up Tommy as a bona fide badass in his own right, which is important for where the story goes. The other big part of this episode, of course, was Abby getting chased by the zombies, Joel saving her, and then one interesting change from the game was it's Dina out with Joel on this patrol rather than Tommy, and she says his name before she even sees that he's with somebody. So that's better than kind of introducing yourself to strangers and maybe telling them your name foolishly. This was just an accident, a very easy mistake to make. Not even really a mistake. She didn't know he was with anybody. Abby brings them back after having her life saved and then brutally murders Joel in front of her friends. Dina's knocked out with a syringe. And Ellie shows up right at the end and is quickly disarmed, thrown to the ground, kicked. And I have to say, I thought Bella Ramsey did a great job in this scene where she's, yelling at Joel to get up, and she's just devastated and she's threatening to kill everyone. And I thought she was super obnoxious last episode, but this episode, I think she really did a good job. And so hopefully the obnoxious, bratty Ellie that we've been seeing, at the beginning of the season is gone now with this tragedy. A couple big differences in this scene. Abby monologues quite a lot, which is unfortunate because it comes off a bit like a mustache twirling villain. The talk just goes on and on and on, and until Joel tells her to shut the fuck up already, or shut the fuck up and do it already. It's a little different than the game where he says something along the lines of, I know you, whatever speech you've got prepared, save it and get this over with. So maybe they should have done that. But what they're doing here with all this exposition is setting up Abby and her motivation and what she's all about, and trying to like sort of spoon feed the audience a little bit more than they do in the game. I don't think this is a great idea. I think if they want to engender empathy for Abby at some point, well, I don't think any of this is really reasonable. I think that as a player of the game and as a viewer of the show, I would have been angry with Abby for killing Joel, even if she had just put a bullet in his head the same way he killed her father. And I would have wanted revenge, but I might have had an easier time coming around and having empathy for Abby later on. Now, there are people who are diehard Abby fans, and when I encounter them on the internet, they like to lob insults at anyone who doesn't like Abby or who isn't grown up or mature enough to empathize with her. But I think this is a problem with the writing and with the way that the story has been framed, in that Abby does such a monstrously awful thing to Joel that I personally, and I know a lot of other people, could not get over that and forgive her. Even though I think, and this is spoilers for the game, okay? Spoilers for the game and the ending of the game. I wanted Ellie to let Abby live in the end, because Abby was so fucked up and emaciated and just in this horrible position. I thought it would have been a good ending for Ellie to have mercy and let her go without the knife fight or any of that stuff, just to let her go and walk away. More so because I think that would have been a healing moment for Ellie than out of really much sympathy for Abby, who's just, you can't set up this brutal, ghastly murder and then expect people, or at least expect me, to feel empathy for Abby, even when she shows that she has good qualities also. I mean, plenty of people with good qualities do horrible things, and you don't just say, okay, well, it's okay that you did this horrible thing. I'd never liked how the game tried to set up Joel as a monster, like as someone who did something really horrible and selfish when he killed the people in Salt Lake and saved Ellie, because as I've said many times, I would have done the same thing in his shoes. I would not let some random Firefly rebels and their shitty doctor kill my daughter. I would fight and die trying to save her, you know? And I'd kill every single one of them if I had to. Because for me, the morality here is whether, you know, you can give your own life for a cause, you can give your own life for the many, but you can't take the life of an innocent. And that needs to be prevented. And it's the only moral choice Joel had was to save her. Now, whether he should have lied about it, that's another question. That's why I think the first game ended so well, and the first season as well, is that it left us on with this moral quandary and with this sense of, well, you know, did he do the right thing saving her? Okay, even if you think that, did he do the right thing lying to her? What would you do? And that's honestly, it's one of the best endings in any video game I've ever played. And that's why I was super resistant to the idea of a sequel, even before I knew what was going to happen in the sequel with Joel and all the rest. And now I want to read a review of a movie to you. This is Roger Ebert's review of The Last Boy Scout. And I think it's interesting because this is a great example of a film review from a reviewer who is really, really able to separate objective observation and his objective appreciation of how this film was made from his own visceral distaste for the film's content. And I think that's important because I also feel like The Last of Us Part 2 is objectively a very well-made game in a lot of ways. It's a very impressive, gorgeous game. There's technical achievement, really brilliant acting, some great music, etc., etc. But I really viscerally disliked it. So here it is. Here's Roger Ebert's The Last Boy Scout review from 1991. The Last Boy... One thing else. Sorry. There's also interesting similarities between his critique of this film and kind of how people might be feeling about this episode in The Last of Us Season 2. The Last Boy Scout opens with a sequence of such sudden and unexpected violence that the audience is stunned into uneasy silence. The movie never looks back, perhaps propelled by the determination of its star Bruce Willis to erase the box office curse of Hudson Hawk. This film panders with such determination to the base instincts of the action crowd that it will, I am sure, be an enormous hit. It was produced by Joel Silver, who has made violence toward women a key element in his films and cheerfully expands its horizons to violence towards children, providing the Willis character with a foul-mouthed 13-year-old daughter who is hauled around by bad guys with a gun pointed at her temple. The film is rated R, proving that violence alone cannot earn the NC-17 rating. It is some kind of a tribute to Tony Scott, who directed the film, and especially to Shane Black and Greg Hicks, who wrote the screenplay, that this material survives its own complete cynicism and somehow actually works. Watching it, I felt like some weather-beaten innocent from an earlier, simpler time. My distaste was irrelevant. This movie is the future. It assumes the average audience now has no standards except those of the mob. The only consistent theme of this film is its hatred of women. The two heroes, Willis and Damon Wayans, have a wife and a girlfriend, respectively, who cheat on them. The wife with Willis's best friend, the girlfriend by prostituting herself. Both men are at home in this screenplay, which hates women with a particular viciousness. The verbal violence begins by calling them bitches and whores and worse over and over again. And the message is that a man can only really trust another man. The end of the movie is peculiar in the way it insists on this. The hero, reconciled with his cheating wife, embraces her and whispers vile obscenities into her ear. We are intended to read them as tender, then he strolls off lovingly with his buddy. I am a reporter. I must report not only the film's willingness to degrade women and children, I must also report the film's slick, clever professionalism. As I said before, this film works. Despite any objection I may have felt, it plays well with an audience, although some of the people around me seemed disturbed by an extended scene in which Willis and his child curse each other. The movie has a lot of laughs, its action sequences are thrilling, its surprises are startling, and it shows a real ingenuity in the ways by which it gets Willis into and out of trouble. The plot involves Willis as an ex-Secret Service agent. He once stopped several bullets intended for Jimmy Carter, who is now a flea-bitten private eye. He's hired to protect a stripper, Halle Berry, who is getting threats, and after she is ambushed, Willis begins an uneasy partnership with her boyfriend, a disgraced NFL star, Wayans, who is booted out of the league for gambling. The plot leads to bigger game, all the way up to a corrupt team owner who wants to buy legislators and legalize gambling on pro football. Willingham is surrounded by sleazy and depraved henchmen. Taylor Negron is magnificently despicable as the worst of them. And there's a plot involving high explosives, kidnappings, high-tech chases, long moments spent on the brink of death, graphic beatings, and the involvement of the young child in the most savage of the violence, to flavor it with a novel edge. The original screenplay for The Last Boy Scout set a record for its purchase price. That was probably because of the humor of the locker room dialogue, since the plot itself could have been rewritten out of the Lethal Weapon movies by any film school grad. The story depends heavily on the device of the talking killer, which I have written about elsewhere. The killer who need only pull the trigger to end the movie, but chooses instead to boast and stall until the hero can somehow outsmart him. The many ways in which Willis outsmarts talking killers in this film provide some of its best moments, and there is also excitement in the climactic scene inside the football stadium, although I imagine the average NFL crowd, confronted with a machine gun battle inside the stadium, would flee rather than cheer on cue. The Last Boy Scout is a superb example of what it is, a glossy, skillful, cynical, smart, utterly corrupt, and vilely misogynistic action thriller. How is the critic to respond? To give it a negative review would be dishonest, because it is such a skillful and well-crafted movie. To be positive is seen to approve its sickness about women. I'll give it 3 stars. As for my thumb, I'll use it and my forefinger to hold my nose. Now, whether you agree with Ebert on his assessment of The Last Boy Scout, if you've seen that film, it's a great example of a critic praising a movie for how well it's made while still criticizing its content. And on that front, I feel very similar about The Last of Us 2, which is an extremely well-made, slickly crafted, but grotesquely violent video game that seems to want to just hurt everyone that it comes across. Whether those, it's a very diverse game, and it seems hell-bent on just hurting as diverse an array of human beings as it possibly can in the most vicious and unspeakable manner possible. And I'm not sure how that's going to translate to screen. I'm not sure how Abby is going to translate to screen, and I'm not sure how audiences are going to react to a series that just simply goes from dark to darker to bleak to bleaker from start to finish. But credit where it's due, I did think this was a great episode. Now, the story itself, based on the game, so we can't really critique the show for this, I think relies on way too many coincidences. The fact that Abby, is out there she manages to find Joel at Jackson Hole, that she just happens to know where they are and find them, and then find Joel out on patrol. I feel like I'm rhyming everything. Joel at Jackson Hole out on patrol. Find him just at the nick of time so that he can save her, and then take him back to her lodge, which apparently he's never even seen or heard about, despite living in this area for years. It's all a lot of coincidences, and it feels a little contrived. But that's the story they were working with, and they did a good job adapting it, and then adding the B story of the Jackson Hole battle, I thought worked tremendously well to sort of break up the moments of Abby and Joel in the lodge, break that up with this epic battle against the White Walkers down in Jackson Hole. So compared to last week's episode, this was infinitely better. This was Bella Ramsey was better. Everyone was great. I think Caitlin Dever did a good job working with her talking killer moment there, even though that was a pretty ham-fisted little monologue expositing all the reasons why she had to kill Joel. Even though Joel only shot her father in the head, ending his life instantly, and did it, to save someone. And she thinks that, 5 years later, it's okay to just brutally torture this man as revenge. I guess the point is that she's become totally corrupted in her path to vengeance, and now Ellie is going to be on that same path, and will she become as corrupted by it and twisted by it as Abby? So I'm going to still watch the show, obviously. I'm reviewing it, so I have to. But that bad taste is back in my mouth, that feeling that I had playing the game after this point in the game, where I just felt like I couldn't quite shake how unpleasant it all feels. And it just doesn't, it doesn't stop. You just feel quite, it's quite upsetting to play this game, and it's quite upsetting to watch the show. And unlike Game of Thrones, where there's some major character deaths, obviously, there's just not enough really, really engaging supporting characters that we know and care about at this point. Because this was initially a game and a season about primarily two people, fighting to survive, fighting for each other, fighting for hope, and ending on that sort of bittersweet note. But this one is we pick up all these characters like Dina. We've just met them. We don't have Tyrion and Arya and all these other fantastic characters that Game of Thrones had, even after certain major characters were killed off in that story. So it's going to be harder to rest all of this on really Ellie and Abby's shoulders, especially because I just don't think many people new to this who didn't play the game will have very much empathy or patience for Abby after this gruesome murder. And I don't think they should, frankly. So let me know what you thought of the episode, the game, whatever, your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.
But this is just the way the show must go. It's a jolin' one, and that is plenty. Better than a jolin' 20. It's a jolin' one, and the Ellie's crying. It's true.